The red DoorDash logo glowed on Mark Levsky's smartphone screen as he sat in his beat-up 2012 Chevrolet Malibu in the McDonald's parking lot. The October wind from Lake Michigan blew the first autumn leaves onto the windshield. 12 months ago, Mark couldn't have imagined that at 32, he would be spending his evenings waiting for notifications about his next order. Mark had worked at the Chrysler auto plant in Detroit for 8 years. It was a stable job, with a union, health insurance, and plans to buy a bigger house for him and Natalie. Everything fell apart when the plant announced massive layoffs. Production restructuring was what they called it at the meeting. For Mark and hundreds of other workers, it meant one thing: unemployment in a city that had never recovered from the economic crisis. He spent the first 2 months going to interviews. Another 2 months were spent choosing between offers with salaries half of what he used to earn. And then he made a decision that seemed temporary. He signed up with a food delivery service. "At least I'll be able to pay the bills while I look for a decent job," he explained to Natalie. But the temporary side job turned into a permanent one. Now his day started at 10 a.m. and ended well after midnight, 6, sometimes 7 days a week. His smartphone vibrated. A new order: 2 burgers, fries, a milkshake. The delivery address was a 20-minute drive away. Mark pressed accept, knowing he would earn no more than $7, maybe with a small tip, if he was lucky. McDonald's was noisy. Saturday night, long lines. Mark joined the line of other delivery drivers, men and women like him, carrying dark red insulated bags. Some, like him, had recently lost their main jobs. Others had been juggling several side jobs for years, trying to make ends meet. After receiving the order, Mark returned to his car. The interior was saturated with the smell of fast food, a constant reminder of how his life had changed. In the glove compartment was a photo of him and Natalie on the shore of Lake St. Clair 3 years ago, smiling, making plans. Natalie worked as an administrator at the law firm Benson, Hale & Partners. When Mark lost his job, she took on more responsibility for paying the bills. Her salary was barely enough to cover the mortgage on their small house in western Detroit, let alone utilities, insurance, and their ever-growing credit card debt. "I'll find something better," Mark promised every month as they sat at the kitchen table, dividing their money between bills. "I know," Natalie replied, but in her eyes he saw what he was afraid to admit to himself. It might not happen. Their conversations grew shorter and shorter. Dinners together became increasingly rare. Mark's schedule didn't coincide with Natalie's 9-hour workday. When she came home, he was usually already on the road, delivering orders during the evening rush hour. When he came home after midnight, she was already asleep. On weekends, when she had time off, he worked especially hard. That's when he could earn the most. By the end of September, they were barely spending more than a few hours a week together. Mark noticed that Natalie had started paying more attention to her appearance, a new haircut, clothes they couldn't seem to afford. "Sales," she explained. "It's a mood booster. I need it, Mark." 2 weeks ago, Natalie mentioned a new financial advisor at their firm. "Daniel helps structure budgets for some of our clients," she said over breakfast, the only meal they still occasionally shared. "He offered to give us some advice on restructuring our debts, for free." Mark remembered how tense he had become. Would an outsider know about their financial problems? But there seemed to be no choice. "Do what you think is best," he replied at the time. Now, as he drove up to his client's house with an order from McDonald's, Mark thought about how Natalie's behavior had changed in recent days. Her phone was always face down now. She was staying late at work more often. "Client meetings," she explained. She mentioned Daniel's name twice in conversation. "Daniel thinks we should refinance our mortgage. Daniel says the job market is changing. Maybe we should think about retraining." Mark delivered the order, received a $2 tip, and returned to his car. The app showed 4 more hours until the end of his shift. His phone vibrated, a message from Natalie. "I'll be late. Don't wait up." It was the third such message in a week. Natalie Levsky fixed her hair in front of the mirror in the women's restroom at Benson, Hale & Partners law firm. The new haircut was more expensive than she could afford, but in recent weeks, she had found herself making more and more of these impulsive purchases. They were small acts of rebellion against the financial pressure that had been suffocating her marriage to Mark for the past year. The clock read 6:30 p.m. The workday had ended an hour and a half ago, but Natalie was in no hurry to go home. The silence of empty rooms awaited her there. Mark would be out delivering orders until late again. Better to stay here, where at least there was the illusion of a normal life. Still working? Daniel Foster's voice interrupted her thoughts. He stood in the doorway of the office, holding 2 paper cups of coffee in his hand. Daniel had joined the firm 3 months ago as a financial advisor for wealthy clients. Tall, impeccably dressed, and with the confidence of someone who had never known real financial hardship. Natalie would have shunned such people in the past, but in recent weeks, his presence had become the only bright spot in her monotonous days. "Just organizing files," she replied, accepting the cup. "Thanks for the coffee." Their fingers touched as she took the cup, a small moment that made her heart beat faster. She scolded herself for the feeling. She had a husband, a marriage that had lasted almost 7 years. But this marriage was no longer what she had imagined when she said, "I do," to Mark. Back then, he was a confident worker with union protection and plans for the future. Now she saw only fatigue and despair in his eyes when he came home after midnight, reeking of someone else's food and disappointment. "Have you thought about what we discussed?" Daniel asked, sitting down on the edge of her desk. By what we discussed, he meant refinancing their mortgage and possible bankruptcy, steps that could ease their financial situation, but that Mark refused to even consider. "It could really help your situation." "Mark thinks he can handle it himself," Natalie replied. "He still thinks it's temporary." "Do you think so?" Daniel asked gently. Natalie looked at the photo on her desk, her and Mark at their wedding, happy, full of hope. "No," she replied quietly. "I don't think so." Their first dinner together happened almost by accident. Natalie stayed late, and Daniel suggested they eat at a small Italian restaurant nearby. "Just a working dinner," she told herself. But the conversation quickly shifted from finance to personal stories. Daniel grew up in Chicago, earned an MBA from the University of Michigan, worked on Wall Street, but returned to the Midwest, tired of the frantic pace of New York. "Detroit is experiencing a renaissance," he said at the time. "There are opportunities for those who know where to look." That first dinner was followed by others, lunches when she could get away from the office, sometimes just coffee after work. Each time, Natalie told herself it was just friendship, just talking about finances. But when Daniel kissed her for the first time 3 weeks ago in his car in the empty office parking lot, she didn't push him away. Then there was his apartment, modern, with a view of the Detroit River, so unlike the cramped house that she and Mark could barely afford. After that came excuses about late meetings and work dinners. Natalie knew she was betraying Mark. Every time she came home after meeting Daniel, she swore to herself that it was the last time. But then a new day would dawn, with new bills to pay and the same absent husband, and her resolve would melt away. "You deserve better than this," Daniel often told her. "You're too smart to be stuck in this rut." Part of her wanted to believe him. Another part remembered Mark, who took evening classes while still working at the factory. Mark, who made her breakfast every Sunday. Mark, before anxiety and despair changed him. "Come over to my place tonight," Daniel said, pulling her out of her reverie. "I have some excellent wine and no plans for the evening." "I can't," Natalie replied. "Mark might come home early." "He always works late on Fridays," Daniel pointed out. "You said so yourself." He was right. Mark always worked double shifts on Fridays. More orders, more tips. He wouldn't be back until 2 in the morning, tired and too exhausted to notice anything unusual. "Okay," she said, "but I need to be home before midnight." Lately, they had become less cautious. Daniel openly flirted with her at the office. Natalie noticed her colleagues' glances, but no one said anything. Twice they had lunch at restaurants where they might run into acquaintances. Last weekend, she left Daniel's scarf at home. Mark didn't notice, but it was a dangerous sign of her growing carelessness. On the way to Daniel's car, Natalie checked her phone. A message from Mark. "We'll be late. Lots of orders. Love you." She felt a pang of conscience, but quickly suppressed it. She sent a short, "Okay, I'm also staying late at work," and put her phone away. Daniel opened the door of his BMW for her. Such a small gesture, and so far from her current reality. As they drove past the rundown neighborhoods of Detroit to his modern apartment building by the river, Natalie thought about the two lives she was now balancing. "What are you thinking about?" Daniel asked, putting his hand on her knee. "Nothing in particular," she lied. In her jacket pocket was the paper Daniel had given her a few days ago, the divorce papers. "Just in case you decide you're ready to move on," he had said at the time. She hadn't signed them yet, but she hadn't thrown them away either. Natalie looked at Daniel's profile, at the confidence that emanated from him. With him, everything seemed possible. A new life, a new beginning, freedom from debt and hopelessness. But something was holding her back. Memories, obligations, or just fear of the unknown. "We're almost there," Daniel said, turning toward the river. The lights of Detroit at night reflected in the dark water. A city of opportunity for some and a trap for others. Natalie didn't know yet which one she was. Mark Levski sat in his car, parked across from their house, and just watched. It was 11:15 p.m., and the light in the bedroom window was still on. Natalie was supposed to be back from work at 7. This was the third time in a week that she had been held up at work. Mark's phone lit up with another notification from DoorDash. "There's a new order nearby." He mechanically pressed decline. His acceptance rate would drop, which could lead to fewer offers in the future, but he didn't care right now. In the last 2 weeks, he had declined more orders than in the previous 6 months of working as a delivery driver. Something was going on with his wife, and he could no longer ignore the signs. New clothes, perfume he hadn't bought, a phone she now never left unattended, and a name that had become too frequent in their rare conversations: Daniel. Mark scrolled through his phone gallery to a photo taken 3 years ago at a Chrysler Company picnic. He was standing next to his co-workers, smiling, wearing a t-shirt with the union logo. Strong, confident in tomorrow. A man capable of supporting a family. This version of Mark Levski disappeared along with his factory pass. Now, instead of a wrench, his main tool was a smartphone with a delivery app. Instead of shop floor colleagues, he spent lonely hours behind the wheel. Instead of a stable salary, he had unpredictable tips and a rating system where a single customer complaint could cost him a day's earnings. The light in the bedroom window went out. Mark looked at his watch, 11:28 p.m. He started the engine and slowly drove away from the house. There was no point in making a scene now. He would return after 2 a.m. as usual, and Natalie would pretend to be asleep. The app vibrated again. "Accept the order to maintain your high rating." Mark pressed accept and headed for the nearest Taco Bell. Another order, another $5. While Mark was immersed in his nightly routine, 30 minutes away, in a modern apartment overlooking the Detroit River, Natalie Levski was pulling on a blouse, sitting on the edge of Daniel Foster's bed. "Stay," Daniel said, watching her in the dim light of the room, illuminated only by the city lights outside the window. "It's late. What's the point of going home?" Natalie shook her head. "I can't. Mark might check." "Check? He's hardly ever home. He said himself that he's working until 2 today." It was true. Mark's schedule had become so predictable that planning meetings with Daniel had become absurdly easy. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday were late shifts. Tuesday and Thursday, day shifts, when Mark usually came home at 8 in the evening, exhausted, barely able to hold a conversation before falling asleep on the couch. Sundays varied, but he almost always took at least a few hours off. "Anyway," Natalie replied, buttoning her shirt, "we have to be careful." Daniel stood up and came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Or we could stop hiding." This topic had come up more and more often in recent weeks. Daniel wanted more than secret meetings. He talked about a future together, a new life, maybe even moving away from Detroit. "Have you thought about what I said?" he asked, referring to the divorce papers he had given her last week. Natalie sighed. "I have. But it's not that simple, Daniel." "Why? You yourself say that your marriage is dead. You barely talk to each other. You have huge debts. He's stuck in this meaningless job with no future." "It's not his fault," Natalie defended her husband, surprised at her own reaction. "The factory closed. He's trying." "Trying?" "Natalie, there are thousands of other options besides food delivery. Retraining, moving to another city, anything. He's just stuck." Natalie was silent. Deep down, she knew Daniel was right. Mark had changed after he was laid off. He had lost his spark, given up, but he was still her husband. They had sworn to be faithful to each other, for better or for worse. "I have to go," she said, pulling away from Daniel's embrace. "Let's talk tomorrow." "I made a reservation at the River Lounge for Friday," he said as she packed her bag. 8 o'clock, and a room at the hotel next door. Natalie froze. "Are you crazy? That's the trendiest restaurant in town. We could be seen." "Exactly." Daniel smiled. "Maybe it's time to stop hiding." On the way home, Natalie thought about Daniel's proposal. The risk was enormous, but something in her responded to his determination, his willingness to bring their relationship out of the shadows. Was she tired enough of the lies to risk everything? At the same time, on the other side of Detroit, Mark Levski was delivering another order to an apartment building. He went up to the 4th floor, knocked on the door, handed over the bag of Chinese food, and silently returned to his car. His mind was preoccupied not with work, but with the many small details he had noticed at home over the past few weeks. A strange tie found under the sofa. "Probably someone from the office," Natalie explained, taking it away too quickly. The smell of cologne in their bathroom. Not his. A bill from a restaurant where lunch cost more than Mark earned in a day of deliveries. Each detail on its own could have an innocent explanation. Together they formed a picture that he didn't want to see but was forced to. Mark's phone vibrated again. A notification appeared on the screen. "Match. Order close to home." The app showed the delivery address, just a few blocks from his own home, in a fashionable neighborhood where he and Natalie could never afford to live. Mark usually avoided orders close to home, afraid of running into people he knew. The humiliation of having his neighbors see him delivering food seemed unbearable. But today he hesitated, staring at the flashing offer. This order would mean finishing his shift early, possibly catching Natalie still awake. Maybe they could finally talk, or at least look her in the eye and try to understand what was going on. The clock on the dashboard read 12:47 a.m. If he accepted this order, he could be home by 1:30 a.m., half an hour earlier than usual. Mark's finger hovered over the screen of his smartphone. One tap, one decision that could change everything. Order about to expire. Accept or decline. After a moment's hesitation, Mark pressed accept. The headlights of Mark Levski's Chevrolet Malibu illuminated the house number at 1842 Oak Street, the delivery address for the Italian pizza he had picked up 10 minutes ago. It was an expensive neighborhood. Stone facades, manicured lawns, new cars in the driveways. Mark rarely took orders in this part of town, preferring not to see how those who hadn't lost their factory jobs lived. It was late, 1:18 a.m. He didn't expect a pizza order at this hour, but Detroit's nightlife didn't follow a normal schedule. Maybe a late party or a night shift of workers ordering food. Mark looked at the box sitting on the passenger seat. The smell of tomato sauce and pepperoni filled the cabin, reminding him of the endless days spent around other people's food that he could never afford. He pulled over to the side of the road and checked the address again. The house was 3 stories tall, with large windows and landscape lighting. A black BMW was parked in the driveway, which Mark hadn't noticed when he took the order. There was something familiar about this car. Grabbing the pizza box, he walked to the front door, mentally rehearsing the standard phrase, DoorDash delivery. Climbing the porch, he rang the doorbell, expecting to meet a sleepy customer. The door opened, and Mark's world turned upside down. Standing in the doorway was a man of about 35, wearing an unbuttoned shirt and holding a glass of wine. Behind him, in the depths of the spacious living room, Mark saw Natalie, his wife, wearing a dress he had never seen before, her hair down, and holding the same glass of wine. A second stretched into an eternity. Natalie noticed him and froze, the glass slipping from her hand and shattering on the parquet floor. "Mark," she said, and the word sounded like a sentence on their 7-year marriage. The man at the door, Daniel, it had to be him, looked back at Natalie, then back at Mark, at his red DoorDash bag, at the pizza box in his hands. "You've got the wrong address," Daniel said in a tone that betrayed irritation mixed with confusion. "No," Mark replied, feeling something inside him break completely. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Mark took a step forward, passing the stunned Daniel. His gaze was fixed on Natalie, who was now standing with her hand pressed to her mouth. "Mark, I can explain," she began. "Explain what?" Mark's voice was unexpectedly calm, even to himself. "How long has this been going on? A month? 2? "Listen," Daniel interrupted, closing the front door and approaching Mark. "I think you'd better leave. We can discuss this like civilized people tomorrow." Mark finally took in the whole room. A bottle of wine on the coffee table, 2 plates with leftover food, Natalie's purse on the sofa, and a jacket, his jacket, which Natalie had given him last Christmas, hanging on the back of a chair. "Is this your house?" Mark asked, even though he already knew the answer. Natalie had brought this man into their home, into the place where they had planned to have children, where they were supposed to grow old together. "Mark, please." Natalie took a step toward him. "It's not what you think." "What do I think, Natalie?" Mark set the pizza box on the table. His hands were shaking. "I think my wife is fucking some guy in a suit while I'm delivering someone else's food around town trying to pay our bills." "Hey!" Daniel put his hand on Mark's shoulder. "Watch your language, and I'm asking you to leave immediately, or I'll call the police." Daniel's touch was the spark that ignited all the tension that had built up over the past few months. Mark spun around, throwing Daniel's hand off him and pushing him in the chest. Daniel stumbled back, but didn't fall. "Mark, stop!" Natalie shouted, stepping closer. "Tell me the truth," Mark demanded, ignoring Daniel's presence. "Were you going to leave me, after everything we've been through?" Natalie hesitated, and that hesitation told Mark everything he wanted to know. "The divorce papers are ready, aren't they?" he continued, "waiting for the right moment to tell me you're leaving me for him?" "Don't you dare say that," Natalie replied, her voice hardening. "You stopped fighting, Mark. You stopped trying. Do you think I can't see how you've given up?" "Given up?" Mark asked. "I work 16 hours a day. I'm trying to keep a roof over our fucking heads." "It's not about the work," Natalie said. "It's that you've stopped believing in the future. You've stopped believing in us." Daniel stepped forward. "I think we all need to calm down. Mark, you can—" "Shut up," Mark interrupted him. "Just shut up. You destroyed my family. You took my wife away." "No one took anyone away," Natalie replied instead of Daniel. "I made a choice. I'm tired, Mark. Tired of the endless debts, your despair, a life that has come to a standstill." Mark felt his heart shatter into pieces. The noise in his ears grew louder, drowning out all other sounds. He saw a photo on the table, Natalie and Daniel on a beach, smiling, happy. The photo was in a frame he had given Natalie on their 5th anniversary. "How long?" he asked again, already knowing that the answer would destroy him. 2 months. Natalie replied quietly. 2 months. All this time, while he was delivering pizza and burgers, while he was falling asleep at the wheel from exhaustion, while he was trying to keep their life from falling into the abyss, she was with someone else. In their house. Mark grabbed the photo and threw it across the room. The frame shattered against the wall. "Mark!" Natalie cried. "Stop!" Daniel took a decisive step forward. "That's it. Enough. I'm calling the police." He reached for the phone lying on the table. Mark rushed towards him, grabbing him by the collar of his shirt. "You're not calling anyone." A fight broke out. Daniel was younger and seemed to work out at the gym, but Mark had spent 8 years on a factory assembly line. His hands were stronger. He pushed Daniel against the wall, and Daniel hit his head and lost his balance for a moment. "Mark, stop it!" Natalie grabbed his arm, trying to pull him away. Mark turned to her, his eyes frozen with pain and rage. "You slept with him in our bed? In our house?" "Stop it!" Natalie backed away. "You're scaring me." "I'm asking you, did you bring him into our bed?" "Yes!" Natalie shouted. "Yes, I did. And you know what? With him, I feel alive. Not like with you, the ghost of the man I once loved." Those words were the last straw. Mark's eyes darkened. He grabbed Natalie by the shoulders and pushed her hard. She stumbled backward, tripped over a broken glass, and losing her balance, hit her head on the edge of the marble fireplace. The sound was dull, but somehow final. Natalie slid down the wall, leaving a red trail on the white marble. Her eyes were open, but her gaze had become glassy. "Natalie?" Mark froze in shock. Daniel pushed him aside and rushed to Natalie, crouching down beside her. "My God, Natalie!" He felt for her pulse at her neck, then looked up at Mark. "You killed her! You fucking psycho, you killed her!" The reality of what was happening hit Mark like a ton of bricks. He took a step back, then another. His wife was lying on the floor of their living room, blood spreading beneath her head, and the man she had been cheating on him with was sitting next to her. "I didn't mean to," Mark muttered, but the words sounded hollow. Daniel took out his phone and dialed 911. His voice was shaking. "I need an ambulance, and the police. A woman has been seriously injured in the head. She's not breathing. Address." Mark didn't listen. He turned and ran out of the house. He got into his car and started the engine with unsteady hands. In the rearview mirror, he saw Daniel run out onto the porch, shouting something after him. But Mark was already stepping on the gas, trying to get as far away as possible from what had just happened. Detective Rachel Morgan arrived at 1842 Oak Street at 2:47 a.m. The red and blue lights of police cars and ambulances illuminated the quiet street, attracting the attention of awakened neighbors who watched the scene from their windows. Morgan, a 38-year-old woman with short brown hair and a sharp gaze, showed her badge to the officer guarding the perimeter and walked under the yellow tape cordoning off the crime scene. Inside the house, forensic investigators were already at work, photographing the scene and collecting evidence. The woman's body was still lying by the fireplace, now covered with a white sheet with a burgundy stain spreading around her head. "What do we have?" Morgan asked the first officer to arrive on the scene. Natalie Levski, 31, died of a head injury, struck against the marble edge of the fireplace. Witness, Daniel Foster, 35, financial advisor, owner of the house, claims that the victim's husband, Mark Levski, caught them together and, during an argument, pushed his wife, causing her to fall and suffer fatal injuries. Morgan nodded and approached Daniel Foster, who was sitting on the sofa answering questions from another detective. He was pale, and there were bloodstains on his white shirt. "Detective Rachel Morgan, homicide," she introduced herself. "Can you tell me what happened?" Daniel looked up at her. "He just showed up at my door, with pizza. He works as a delivery guy. He saw Natalie and everything went to hell." "Were you in a romantic relationship with Mrs. Levski?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, for about 2 months. She was going to file for divorce." "Did her husband know about it?" "I don't think so. At least, not until tonight." Morgan looked around the room. a broken picture frame by the wall, shards of a glass next to where the body lay, a red insulated bag with the DoorDash logo on the floor by the entrance, a pizza box on the table, already cold. "Did you order pizza delivery at 1 in the morning?" Morgan asked. "What? No, of course not. He just showed up with it. I think he tracked us down somehow." "So you're saying that Mark Levski came here with pizza as an excuse to break into the house?" "Yes. No. I don't know." Daniel ran his hand over his face. "It all happened so fast. We were here, having dinner. Then the doorbell rang, and there he was." Morgan approached one of the detectives. "Check the delivery app on the victim's phone and Mr. Foster's. See if a pizza order was placed." Then she turned to another officer. "Any info on the suspect?" "Mark Levski, 32, former Chrysler worker, has been working for DoorDash for the last 12 months. No arrests, except for a couple of parking tickets. Vehicle is a 2012 Chevrolet Malibu, gray, already on the wanted list. Neighbors on Oak Street saw him leave around 1:30 a.m. Morgan nodded and walked over to the body. The medical examiner was just finishing the initial examination. "What can you tell me?" she asked. "Traumatic brain injury. A strong blow to the hard edge of the fireplace. Death was almost instantaneous. Time of death between 1:20 and 1:30 a.m., judging by the body temperature." Morgan examined the fireplace. There were traces of blood and a few strands of dark hair on the marble edge. "Any signs of a struggle on the body? Defensive wounds?" "Bruises on the shoulders, fresh, possibly from being grabbed or pushed. No defensive wounds on the arms. She didn't try to defend herself." "Alcohol?" "Judging by the smell and the glasses, they were drinking wine. The exact level will be known after toxicology." Morgan returned to Daniel. "Tell me again what happened after Mark Levski found you with his wife." Daniel sighed. "He started yelling. Natalie tried to calm him down. He grabbed a photo of Natalie and me and smashed it. I tried to call the police, but he lunged at me. Natalie tried to separate them and he pushed her. She fell, hit her head, and that was it." "Did you see exactly how he pushed her?" "Yes. He grabbed her by the shoulders and threw her back with force. It wasn't an accident. He was furious." One of the officers approached Morgan. "Detective, the neighbor across the street says she saw a DoorDash delivery driver's car parked 2 houses down from here about an hour before the incident. The driver was just sitting there, seemingly watching the house." Morgan frowned. "So he could have been watching the house. Check the security cameras in the area and track his delivery route for tonight." Another officer added, "There's no order for tonight on Mr. Foster's DoorDash app, nor on the victim's phone." "So the pizza was a pretext," Morgan concluded. She turned to Daniel. "Did you two meet here at your house before?" "No," Daniel replied. "We usually met at her house when Mark was at work. Today was the first time she came to my place." "Why today?" Daniel paused. "Natalie said she was ready to move on. We talked about moving in together. She was going to sign the divorce papers next week." Morgan thought for a moment. How did Mark know where his wife was if they had never met at Foster's house before? Did Mr. Levski have access to his wife's phone? Could he track her location? "Maybe. I don't know," Daniel replied. "Natalie was careful. She always said Mark couldn't find out about us until she was ready to file for divorce." The forensic scientist approached Morgan. "Detective, we found a location tracking app on the victim's phone. Find my friend. Her husband's account has access to it." Morgan nodded. "That's how he found her. Now we need to find him." She turned to the team. "Check all the motels within a 50-mile radius. Contact DoorDash, get his account details and last known locations. Check the cameras at the city exits and the bridges to Canada. This guy couldn't just vanish into thin air." When Natalie Levski's body was finally taken away and the forensic team continued to collect evidence, Rachel Morgan stepped out onto the porch of the house. The cold wind from Lake Michigan blew the last leaves across the deserted street. Somewhere out there, in the nighttime streets of Detroit, was a man whose life had been shattered in a matter of minutes, turning him from a betrayed husband into a murderer. and Detective Morgan was determined to find him. At dawn on the third day after the murder, Mark Levski threw his phone into the Detroit River. He watched as the device disappeared into the dark waters. 48 hours ago, he was just a desperate man trying to save his family. Now, he was a fugitive, wanted for murder. After fleeing Oak Street, Mark spent his first night in his car, parked at an abandoned factory. He didn't sleep, replaying the events of the evening over and over in his head. Natalie falling and hitting her head on the fireplace, blood on the white marble, her frozen gaze. The next day, he left his car in the airport parking lot and checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, paying cash and giving a fake name. On the evening news, he saw his photo and a report that he was wanted. Now, having gotten rid of his phone, he stood on the waterfront, not knowing what to do next. Run to Canada? Turn himself in? Or just step into the cold water and end it all? At the Detroit Police Department, Detective Rachel Morgan stood in front of a board with materials from the Levski case. 3 days of investigation had yielded a lot of information, but the suspect remained at large. Levski's car was found in the airport parking lot, her partner, Detective Kim, reported. After that, the trail goes cold. Morgan pointed to a photo of the house where the murder took place. The surveillance theory has been confirmed. DoorDash records show that Levski deliberately picked up an order near Foster's house and then followed him for at least an hour. Premeditated murder? Kim asked. Not necessarily. He may have planned a confrontation, but not murder. The medical examiner confirmed that death was caused by a blow to the head. Technically, it was manslaughter. What about Levski's past? A history of violence? Nothing. Before he lost his job, he was a model citizen. Stable job, marriage, no arrests. After being laid off, he worked 7 days a week. A classic story of Detroit's economic collapse. Morgan studied the photos of Natalie and Daniel. Their romance began shortly after Foster became the firm's financial advisor. Colleagues say Natalie had changed in recent months. She dressed better, seemed more confident, talked about a fresh start. Morgan's phone rang. She listened to the message and hung up. Possible sighting. Patrol officers have spotted a man resembling Levski by the river. Mark didn't notice the police cars approaching until he heard a voice through a megaphone. Mark Levski, this is the police. Stay where you are and raise your hands. He turned slowly. 4 officers with their weapons at the ready were approaching him. The thought of escape flashed through his mind and vanished. There was nowhere to run. His life had ended the moment Natalie hit her head on the fireplace. Mark raised his hands and remained seated. The officers quickly handcuffed him. In the interrogation room, Detective Morgan sat across from Mark. Mr. Levski, do you understand your rights? You have waived your right to an attorney, but I must make sure you understand the consequences. Mark nodded. I understand. I won't deny what I did. Tell me what happened that night, Morgan suggested, turning on the tape recorder. I had been suspicious for several weeks. Natalie had changed, staying late at work, new clothes. I found a location tracking app and set it up on her phone, Mark began. That night, I saw that she was in an unfamiliar neighborhood, expensive houses. I took a delivery nearby and saw her car at Foster's house. I waited, thinking maybe it was a work meeting, even though it was midnight. But she didn't come out. So you went there with pizza as an excuse? Yes. Daniel opened the door. I saw Natalie inside. We argued. She said she didn't love me anymore, that I was a ghost of the man she once loved. His voice broke. When she said she brought him to our house, to our bed, I just pushed her. I didn't mean to kill her. I swear I didn't. She fell and hit her head. Mark covered his face with his hands. Why did you run away? Morgan asked. I panicked. I couldn't believe it had happened, that I had done it, that she was dead. Mr. Levski, you will be charged with manslaughter. Are you sure you don't want a lawyer? Yes, I did it. What's the point of denying it? The trial lasted 4 days. The prosecution presented evidence of deliberate stalking, But with no history of violence and Daniel's testimony that the death was caused by a fall after being pushed, the jury found Mark guilty of manslaughter. Judge Elizabeth Harris announced the sentence. Mr. Levski, the court finds you guilty of the involuntary manslaughter of Natalie Levski. I sentence you to 8 years in prison with the possibility of parole in 5 years. Mark stood motionless as the officers approached to take him away. There was no one in the courtroom to support him. Natalie's parents sat in the front row, their faces reflecting the pain of their loss. Daniel Foster sat behind them with an impassive expression. 6 months into his sentence, Mark began working in the prison library. Detective Morgan found him there for a final interview. "How are you adjusting?" she asked. "I'm existing, day by day," Mark replied. "I'm participating in rehabilitation programs, therapy, counseling. Are there any details that should be included in the final report?" Mark looked out the window. "You know what's ironic? After I was laid off, I was so afraid of losing Natalie. I worked 16 hours a day to keep our life together, and that's exactly why I lost her." "The economic crisis has affected many families," Morgan remarked, "but not all of them end up like this." "I know, I'm not making excuses, but the system doesn't give people like me a second chance. When the factory closed, they told us to retrain. For what? Without an education? And delivery was humiliating, feeling like a failure every day." "Have you been in touch with Natalie's family?" "I wrote a letter of apology. They didn't reply." "What about Daniel Foster?" "No, and I don't want to." "If you could go back to that night, what would you do differently?" Mark was silent for a long time, then replied, "I wouldn't have gone to that house. I would have accepted that our marriage was over. I would have let her go. You know what's the hardest part? It's not prison. It's knowing that she died thinking I hated her, when in reality, I just loved her too much to let her go." 6 years later, Mark was released on parole. Detroit had changed a little. The city center was undergoing a revival, but the working-class neighborhoods remained the same. Boarded-up houses, closed stores, shattered hopes. The house where he and Natalie had lived had long since been sold to pay off debts. Mark settled into a small apartment and got a job as a mechanic. In the evenings, he attended a support group for former prisoners. One day, on his way home, he noticed a DoorDash delivery driver in a beat-up car, a young guy with a tired look in his eyes. In the back seat, he could see a familiar red cooler bag. Detroit continued to change, but for many, Mark and Natalie's story was repeating itself in new forms. Unstable jobs with no guarantees, relationships crumbling under the pressure of circumstances, invisible cracks that turned into irreparable fractures in times of crisis. Mark took the sobriety coin he had received in prison out of his pocket. He always carried it as a reminder of the price of a single moment of loss of control. The price he, Natalie, and everyone who knew them had paid. The traffic light changed, and the courier drove away, disappearing into the evening traffic of Detroit. Mark watched him go, then turned and walked home, carrying the burden of his past and trying to find meaning in what was left of it.